Yes, everyone, welcome back to the Irish Hotspur. And Ange Postecoglou has made it no secret he wants to be challenging for trophies this next season. But there's one big stumbling block that will stop Ange from achieving his ambition unless it's rectified this summer and beyond. And that's what we are here to talk about today. Let's start with the squad, though. Where do you begin?
Well, look, Jack, first of all, in order to challenge for trophies, you have to be able to build a squad. Every single year we encounter an injury crisis, we end up sort of shoehorning players into roles that they're just not used to cover the absentees and injuries that we ended up suffering. And the players we end up shoehorning into those positions to fill gaps are players that are not even good enough to fill their own position. They're always backup. And what ends up happening is, because of their incompetency, the manager's competency has ended up being called into question. I'm absolutely sick of it. And we're heading into a new era at this club. And over the last few years, we are notoriously bad for getting our deadwood out, getting them off the books. We piss about, loaning them out, etc. If they can't find clubs, it's ground. We'll keep you around as a squad player. And all that does is delay your incomings and also your ambitions on the football pitch. So I just feel strongly that it's something that really sort of needs to be rectified under Ange Postecoglou. Pochettino gave the famous old quote, we need a painful rebuild, and we've delayed it. We've brought in sort of win now managers to try and delay that painful rebuild, cover over cracks, and it hasn't worked. Now, Ange has come in here against all the odds and has had an amazing season compared to what people expected of Ange when he walked in here, but what also people expected of the squad over the course of this season. And he's dragged them to a fifth-place finish, and he spoke about, like we said, his ambitions of winning a trophy, and that's his next step we need to take. But he's also spoke about having the right players to be able to do that. And I'm just absolutely fed up of it. For instance, Jack, we suffered an injury to Destiny Udogie. Your answer is Ben Davies. That guy's just not good enough. He never has been. He hasn't been for a while. Anyone we've brought in at left back, he's always automatically been backup. We don't have anyone chasing down Destiny Udogie to keep him at a certain level on the football pitch. And there, before he got injured, the last 6 or 7 games, there was a massive drop-off. And in order to prevent that, you have to have players that are hungry, that are competent to what the manager wants them to do, so that they can challenge the players in their positions. At centre-back this season, we had injuries to Romero and Van de Ven. We ended up playing 2 full-backs there. This sort of shit cannot continue. And off the back of it, because there was a drop-off in quality, results, and everything else we were seeing on the pitch, people were calling for Ange Postecoglou's head before the end of the season, and I'm absolutely fed up with it. Basuma at CDM, he's had a real mixed bag of a campaign, but that's 2 stupid sending-offs this season. Wouldn't have happened if he didn't have an Ollie Skip fighting for his position. So for me, in order to maintain the standards and the energy that Ange Postecoglou wants from his squad or from his team on the pitch over the course of the whole season, we can no longer accept that this is good enough, and we have to do a lot more this summer in order to help the guy and steer this in the right direction.
So for you, a key element of actually having a trophy-winning team, especially under Ange Postecoglou, a big element part of it is actually emphasis on outgoings and not delaying those outgoings of players that for a while now Spurs fans would have at least somewhat of an agreement that, yeah, for the long run, these guys aren't going to really be good enough if we really want to be challenging for trophies. And you gave examples of Ben Davies, Skip, and or even maybe not as much always the outgoings, but Spurs delaying even certain things that should have just been happening a while ago. Spurs knew that they needed to get rid of Dyer, Sanchez, some of these guys this last summer, but they waited a little too long, and then they ended up not being able to get in a Dragusin through the door in the summer, and then had to wait until January in order to do so. To a degree, as well as Emerson and Ben Davies played, we paid the price for it inevitably. And the same thing happened at left back, where Destiny Udogie was a brilliant signing. But if we were to get rid of Reguilón, Sessegnon, we knew wasn't ever going to be available. All of that in consideration, Spurs didn't bring in or get rid of a left back to bring in another one. So they could have also thought about it in that situation. And then you look in the past of Harry Kane, kind of backup number 9s that have never been good enough, or ones that we didn't bring in. So for you, Dave, incomings are important, but it's actually more an emphasis on starting with outgoings. That's where you start.
No, 100%, Jack. For instance, right, is there any coincidence at the start of the season we were able to compete with the top 6 teams, but towards the end of the seasons we were far off it? Because we're playing the likes of Emerson, who's a right back, at left back, and he's being, targeted. you know, and before you know it, you're 2-3-0 down and the game's gone out of the balance. And then Ange Postecoglou and everyone else gets the blame, but he's trying the best he can. He's having to shoehorn players. But the reason why I say it's important more so on the outgoings very, very quickly over this summer, Jack, is because, you know, we've got players as backups for squad players, but believe it or not, we've also got nearly another 11 that was sent out on loan last season, and the squad players we've got right now ain't going anywhere until them guys are off the books, and we've just got an absolute backlog. And this is why I think the club have to take a proper zero tolerance policy this summer and really, you know, get rid of that backlog, because people don't realize this, but it does affect your incomings as well, because you're very hesitant to maybe knee-jerk and go and get that player exactly that you want and get him straight in the door at all costs, because you're worried about the money. Okay, well, I'm carrying this much on the wage bill. I have to be able to get this guy to go somewhere, but there's no interest. So now I need to go and find a loan move. And it just slows down the whole process.
Completely agree. And it feels like with Spurs that they just never really have that sort of grit to them or that sort of ruthlessness about them when it comes to outgoings. We've had loan armies that we've sent out before that could probably field 2 different 11s of loans. And that also speaks to that, the poor recruitment, of course, under directors of football like Steve Hitchen, but also Spurs not really being ruthless enough with some of those signings that they inevitably knew were never going to be good enough, or never going to actually challenge for the first team, but they just delay in hopes that they could get some sort of their money back or some type of, you know, rationale with the wage bill, like you said there. And Spurs have paid the price for it, but it's not as much Spurs in general, right? It's more managers that we're trying to talk about, right? Managers and their pathway to challenging for trophies have paid the price for this way of thinking.
Well, us fans pay the price too. We harbor them dreams, you know, we pay the price too.
Of course. Dave, I'd probably rush to it a little bit, but you mentioned outgoings as a key element to it. But what about incomings? What type of players do you need to bring in order to replicate or somewhat instill a trophy winning mentality like teams like City, even, you know, we've seen in the past from Chelsea and plenty of other Premier League sides that have won on a regular basis? What type of mentality or what type of incoming philosophy or transfer philosophy, should I say, that you need to instill?
Well, look, maybe there's stigma out there that you can't compete with Man City because the millions of pounds that they spend, and at Tottenham Hotspur, we're never going to spend that. And then also there's another argument. Is it realistic to have a squad of 2 players of similar quality challenging for every single position? Well, first of all, I think you can go and match Man City. It's just about having a proper ambition to go and do so. And if you do that, you end up filling that squad out with players that are hungry to make an impact in the Premier League, that want to be in the Premier League, that want to be that star. You know, you bring in players like that. We've already started to do it. You don't need hundred millions of pounds of players. We've already rejuvenated this club with the likes of Destiny Udogie, Christian Romero, Van der Ven, Pedro Porro, Vicario. We've done a lot of recruitment that's 27 or under. Bentancur, Kulusevski, Madison. We've basically rejuvenated this club to a certain point without having to go and spend them hundred millions of pounds of players. We're sitting in 5th. We're not too far off. So there is still a pathway where the club can still go and do this, continue on with the same recruitment method, you know, of finding these young gems that they're pulling in from these leagues across Europe and integrating them into the team. And before you know it, you've got a team that's creating competition. You know, when we had the likes of Dyer and that, people were saying who would want to come and sit on the bench behind Romero on that? It's not going to happen. Well, Dragic turned down Bayern Munich to come and sit on our bench. You know what I mean? So it can be done. It's just about having the ambition and the right plan in place to be able to lure that player in. And I feel like under Postecoglou, one of his strengths that you hear with every player, as soon as I spoke to him, I want to sign. You know, Vicario was ready to sign in blood, which I thought was a bit alarming, but I love it, you know? And that's the sort of what we need. And I think the club really need to capitalize on this now, get the outgoings, and then continue on with the right recruitment method that they're doing, because the age and the profile of the players they're bringing in, they can get around the pitch, you know, the way Postecoglou needs to do them. And I just think there's so many things that's right there now, and we're just waiting on the club to really sort of take that zero tolerance approach to the outgoings, but also getting the ingoings in and having the ambition to create that squad.
I think they've done a much better job in terms of the incoming Spurs of late, where I will leave my one, maybe start with the negative of what I don't think they've ever really done well. And it's even since Paratici has come in, sadly, and I think it's just been the case for a long time with Spurs, when they do end up having to teeter around the record transfer fees for the club, lots of times they've gotten it wrong. Lots of times they seem to not do their due diligence. And even if they do spend big on a player, just seems like a lot of our biggest of spendings have never really been guys that ever challenge for the first team or pretty much walk into the first team. That's been always a strange ordeal, where the ones we spend so much more on, Spurs fans are really not at all convinced by, where the ones that we spend a lot less on are ones that Spurs fans feel like are real gems, or kind of like diamonds, in the rough. And that's where we've always done a really good job. And even actually to a degree before the days of Paratici, we had that tendency to kind of find these unhidden, or these hidden talents right across Europe and around. And what we're doing a better job of is continuing that. But now we're getting in more homegrown recruitment, which we didn't do in the past, or we didn't do as well of a job or as good of a job in homegrown recruitment. Another element is we're bringing in young homegrown players, actually, as much as we're bringing in young foreign homegrown players like Vuskovic, Pop Matasar, Dragusin, etc. We're also bringing in the guys like Junsuit Bell, Lancashire from the other clubs. And we brought in guys like, of course, Phillips, who's another really talented up and coming homegrown player. Guys that we know could qualify through our academy. Even that's how good it is, right? And that's what Spurs, I think, are doing a better job of in the past. I think we had signed guys maybe like Jack Clark, but again, that's another one that, right, we ended up not doing the real due diligence on, or didn't really see it as the right maybe recruitment for the manager at that time, of course. And I think Spurs have more alignment with the manager than they have done in the past. There seems to be smarter recruitment when it comes to, like I said, the stats, the reading behind the players, the mentality, like you brought up. So Spurs do a lot of good things right when it comes to the incomings, and they're getting it right more often than they've been getting it wrong, at least in my opinion, of late. Yes, there will be some ones we'll get wrong, but compare it to the record of Steve Hitchen in the past, it's completely night and day, and Spurs in a better spot. But we have to get, in my opinion, Dave, the big recruitment right when you do spend the 50, 60 million pound signings on. I don't think we've still done it that right. Richarlison, we have faith in him, but he hasn't repaid that fee. Davinson Sanchez of the past, Ndombele, you look at Lo Celso, James Madison had a half a good season, at least in my opinion. We know he's going to probably come good, but technically he hasn't repaid, I think, the whole fee yet. And Brennan Johnson's another who eventually, I think, will repay the fee, but don't really know if he did in that first season straight away, which is harsh to say, but just want to point out that big money signings haven't always been spot on for Spurs. That's my one big criticism.
No, 100%. And I feel the exact same as you. I remember how many times have we had this big fanfare around big money signing, and then 6 months later we're chasing him out of the club because he's just an absolute donkey. I completely agree with you. But for me, we're not going to get back to that level, and we're not going to start bringing in players unless we undertake the process that, we've sort of been talking about here today. Because when you start taking that process and bringing in the big money name signings, is when you are adding to a squad that you're already very happy with. For instance, Ndombele only came in once we made the Champions League final, and to a large degree, I think Levy thought Pochettino was happy with the squad. So the money that he had to outlay, he didn't have to outlay over 10 positions. We're still in that process where, we still need 7, 8 positions to be able to be covered right throughout this team to be able to create competition. So that won't happen until next summer, but that means we have to get our move on this summer to be able to put ourselves in that position. So once next summer, we should then be in a position to be able to sprinkle the team with that stardust, that bit of talent that you're talking about when you only need 1, 2, 3 signings. So that's why it's very, very important that we undertake this process that we've been talking about here today to accelerate it, to kick on, because I agree with you. We've got a lot of good components that the club have already done, that put in place, that I think top clubs have. You look at Man City, one thing, people say they have billions of pounds to spend, but their recruitment is always spot on. They rarely get it wrong. Even when they spend the big money, we've got a very good sort of recruitment process in place now. Like you said, we've got the right guy leading that in terms of Paratici. All that's missing is for us to get a move on this summer. That's all.
We do always say that Man City's, all their signings are big money signings, but you compare them to some of the other clubs, they still get a lot of their 30 million, 40 million euro signings that are around the regular kind of clubs, top 6 kind of club signings. They get those right on a regular basis as well. So I agree. So far, we've said it starts with outgoings, get rid of the deadwood, get rid of the guys that fill in positions that we know aren't going to actually be good enough in case there are injuries, and in case we need to rest players, they need to sustain the same level. Then the second part sounds like is continue the same recruitment, continue the same smart recruitment by Spurs, but some little tweaks here and there that you and I both brought up of what they could do a little better. What's the third part? Or there are many parts to it. We're not going to get to all of them, but Dave, but what's another key element that you think of this, preventing Ange from running into these stumbling blocks that we've been mentioning?
The last part is, and this is where I think Ange Postecoglou probably needs to be a little bit brave, Jack, is the club ain't going to field competition for every single place this summer. It's not going to happen. But this is where I think Postecoglou needs to be brave and pick 3 or 4 of them under 21s and keep them around, a hybrid of under 21 and senior team next season, depending on where they're called upon, nurture them to become the player that he needs to do. Because I believe, which I'm also dropping, wonder kids at Tottenham Hotspur that could save Daniel Levy millions. And I've had to cut that list in half, by the way. There's more that I could have included that I haven't. So I think that's the last maybe process that really needs to be undertaken. And that is, bringing through the next one of our own. We've had it in Ledley King, we've had it in Harry Kane. And what I've noticed is when we've had Ledley King there, he's brought us to great heights. When we've had Harry Kane there, it's brought us to great heights. Well, I mean, there's about 12 players there now, so surely one of them, at least one of them, can become the next one of our own. And that's where I think Postecoglou needs to create that. He can create that extra bit of competition by having guys that want to play at Tottenham Hotspur, that want them minutes, that want to make their debut, make a career for themselves. And a lot of them actually support the club as well. So you're never going to see them have, put in stroppy performances or show them being pissed off and stuff like that, because they love the club the way we do. And I think that's the last thing about this rebuild. It's crying out for 1 or 2 youngsters. And I think Postecoglou would also buy himself more time, like Pochettino did when he turned to the academy. And that's the last thing I would say is needed.
That's still my last point there on that. I think you buy yourself time actually as a manager, as much as we're talking about winning trophies when it comes to staying in the job, which is just as important sometimes for being able to win trophies in the long run. When you do incorporate the youngsters and give them the right moments, and if they take those chances, which you can then be the beneficiary of, you can buy yourself even more time. And also it allows fans to then dream, allows fans to think that the future is bright, the future can be lily white, all that good stuff, right? So we need to see youngsters in this team being given the chance. Not all of them can take them at the right time or right away, but some of them will. And Dave and I's belief is that some of them will. And then we find ourselves dreaming of trophies and dreaming of a future with amazing players for the here and now, and then amazing players for the future. And that's a beautiful recipe to have.
Enjoy your weekends. Have a great time. Thank you very much for tuning in, and get over and check out my other video, Wonder Kids That's Going to Save Levy Millions.
Check out that video, please. And if you are lonely during this Euros period, feel free to join us on the TIFO platform. Check out our community section. We're giving it lots of good plugs over there, and look forward to any of those, and see you for the future, everybody. Come on, you Spurs. In the big Ange we trust. Let's get a strong rebuild this summer. See you, everyone.